Rosicrucianism that I like a lot at this point, which is that along the path of initiation, as you begin to understand processes other people don't understand, there can be the temptation to use that knowledge to manipulate other people, or to manipulate all types of things. Let's say you understand psychology and somebody else doesn't. You can manipulate them with all types of things in neurolinguistic programming and things of that kind. What words do you use? What tonality do you use? How do you present the information? You can manipulate them all over the place. And so in Rosicrucianism, there's a very strong rule that all the powers and understandings gained on the path will be put to the service of other people. And so that's like the first rule in Rosicrucianism. Otherwise, as you develop the abilities, you will get that temptation of, well, I could get what I want right now because they don't understand this process, but I do. So initiation and inner alchemy. Alchemy has to do with the transformation of something from a base state to a higher state. But there's an important thing that's hidden in that, which is that the base state has to exist first. You're turning lead into gold, but there had to be the lead there first to create the gold. So this means that hidden within, all types of lower structures are the seed of its full fruition, very much like the classical illustration of the caterpillar and the butterfly. You don't know looking at the caterpillar that over time its entire structure has laid within it the ability to become a winged butterfly. But it's the exact same thing in the human being, which is why they depicted the higher spiritual bodies of the human being as always being with wings, traveling through the spiritual worlds. So we develop the physical body. We develop the body of life force. We develop our consciousness. And in the Rosicrucian work, there's very detailed descriptions of earlier stages of evolution. And it relates to things like Eastern teachings about the great Manvantaras, stages of planetary evolution, in which all these things were laid down at an earlier time that we're not going to get into tonight. So make it very straightforward. But then we come to the point of developing our self-awareness, the I am presence. And that's where we are today. Human beings have developed this, and now we're at this critical point of developing the I am self-awareness, which the Rosicrucians see as being the true message of Christianity. The Rosicrucians see the whole issue of Jesus and Christ being a particular human being of Yeshua ben Joseph, a rabbi who had developed to the point of being able to actually unify himself energetically and in consciousness with the being of the Christ. Now, who is the Christ? It's related to what I referred to before in the Zoroastrian tradition with the Ahura Mazda, the aura of the sun, and the classical tradition of the sun god. Because it was understood in the ancient traditions this was not something pagan, in the detrimental way we use that term sometimes today in the West, but rather this had to do with the whole way that God manifests in the world. And so if we look at our local system, the solar system, everything moves around the sun. And the sun is the inexhaustible source of life in the solar system. It is light and it is heat. Without that light and heat, we would have no life here. And it was understood that if you actually literally look into the energetic aura of the sun, there are spiritual beings of such a high nature that it would be very difficult for them to manifest into denser bodies. They need something of that level to match their own nature. And this is connected to certain of the spiritual hierarchies and to the Christ being. So when they tried to understand this whole mystery of what is the Christ in the early Christian centuries, there was a wonderful text written by one of the great early church fathers in Egypt, whose name was Origen. And Origen wrote a book called On First Principles. And in the book On First Principles, he gives a very simple and beautiful description of how can we understand what the Christ being is. The Christ being is nothing other than a being emanated from the Godhead that has all the qualities of the Godhead in a unified form, but reduced in scale to where human beings can directly interact with this being. Because it was understood originally that the Godhead is everything. The Godhead is literally everything everywhere. But you take those qualities and you create a being that has that at the macrocosmic level, and that was understood to be the Christ being. And then the human being was actually the microcosm of that emanated Godhead. We are the crown of creation, etc. And so what this means in the early Christian centuries is they understood the Christ as being of the exact same nature as the human being. The Christ is almost a kind of oversoul of all human beings at the macrocosmic level. We all connect to the Christ being. And one of the things that Rosicrucians lament is that this impulse came in from lower states of consciousness trying to understand the teachings in Christianity that then somehow made Christianity something that was a separate sect, separate from other sects, which was not the initial concept. The initial concept is that the Christ being is the actual higher consciousness aspect that is a living being at a higher macrocosmic level that every human being is connected to. It's not something for one particular set-aside group of people. Some might be more conscious of it than others, but from the perspective of a Rosicrucian, you can find people that are more deeply connected to Christ than someone that says they're Christian, who are Buddhist, Hindus, whatever. It has to do with their illumination of consciousness and what they're resonant with. And so it's a thing of this actual manifestation of the Godhead at a higher level that has all the qualities of the Godhead so we can interact with it, reduced in scale. So this I am self-awareness is something that is related to the entire Christ mystery, building through the Jewish text and then into the esoteric Christian text. So again, the 7 I am sayings of the book of John are understood by the Rosicrucians not to be that you have to pledge some type of loyalty to Jesus Christ as a kind of master in order to not be tortured or to die forever, but rather it's a matter of the I am is the way and the light. The I am is the resurrection and the life. That it's that spark of the divine inside of us that's of the exact same nature as the Christ being. There is no separation between them. They're both emanation from the same ocean of fire. That's the consciousness of God. That's the essence of all of this. And that's the stage we're at today. So the Rosicrucians see this as the point we're at where we have to illuminate our awareness, to actually illuminate that spark. Now, we've gone through a process we'll talk about in a moment where actually we have become more and more individualized. And when we actually pass through this stage at a higher level, we first become more deeply self-aware, but then we actually become aware in a transpersonal way. So not all of ourselves is so focused. But first it starts with focus on the self. We'll get to that in a moment. Now the inner alchemy of this is that once we have developed that fire, and this is represented in the esoteric Christian tradition as the flame above the head of the disciples at Pentecost. It's a literal flame that ignites a spiritual structure that moves in a vertical axis through the human body. And at this energy center above the human head, it illuminates to be the center of the Holy Spirit within Christian depictions. But I've worked with people from many other religions that know all about this first center above the head and its ignition into higher consciousness. This is a particular way it can be presented in the Western understanding. So as we develop that aspect of ourselves that's of the same nature as the Christ, same nature as the Godhead, can now illuminate with light and transform with the fire the lower bodies. That means that then we can train our I am spiritual self-awareness to actually transform our consciousness to a higher level. It's an alchemical transformation of the consciousness to become something different of a higher nature. And then it can then transform our entire body of life force, the entire etheric body, chi, ki, prana, to a higher level. And then it can actually transform the physical body. That's what in esoteric Christianity is referred to as the resurrection body of the Christ after the crucifixion. And sometimes in the esoteric text is referred to as the phantom body. In modern metaphysical terms, we primarily refer to it as the full light body. So again, what we have is the I am, once it completely develops, and we have that awakened spark of the divine inside of us, it transforms our consciousness. Now, as it transforms our consciousness, we have to start with, and now we're getting onto the road of what is Rosicrucian initiation about, and why is it done this way, to first start to analyze our own internal life. We have to be aware of what am I thinking, what am I feeling, what am I doing? Because most of the time we're completely unconscious. These are the kind of things that you find in many traditions, like in the work of Gurdjieff. If you look at the foundations of Gurdjieff's work, he talks about the fact that the terror of the situation, in his terms, is that the whole human race is asleep. We think we're awake and we're walking around in the world, but we're still fast asleep, and we just keep playing out the same reactive psychological patterns again and again and again. So we have to go through a process that he calls waking up and becoming self-aware. And so we start simply observing ourselves. So the process of self-observation is fundamental in just about all classical initiation traditions. Without self-observation, you can't begin to crystallize out this level of awareness. And you can't start changing your detrimental psychological patterns of how you think and how you speak and how you interact with people and how you feel internally to something that's more beneficial. Now, over time, this develops to a higher level, to where your awareness actually becomes transpersonal, so that you're not completely focused on yourself, but rather you can take in the consciousness states of more and more people. And we'll get back to that a little